Thank you all so much. Um, okay, we can go ahead, Faizah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Rahma. It is an honor for me to be here, present, and share space with so many champions. All those who take foster care youth under their care. I consider them champions of the world. It's a big take and a big responsibility, and it just means that your heart is big enough to care for others and make the world a better place. So, our presentation today is um, on, hold on, let me just share my screen, thriving in schools while managing trauma. And we know that kids who go through the foster care system, they've experienced some type of trauma, some more, some less, but nevertheless, they have experienced trauma. And this presentation is just focused on supporting Muslim foster youth and unaccompanied youth as well. Our agenda today, we're just gonna, have a little icebreaker. We'll talk about why back to school can be hard, challenges for Muslim foster youth, how trauma affects learning, what caregivers can do at home and with the school, building a support network, and just, key takeaways and reflection. So before we jump into our presentation, I want us to take a minute and I want us to think about, you know, where home is, there's a lot of people that think home is where the heart feels safe. And we want to reflect on that. I want you to take a minute and just think about the place that felt, like your home, where you felt your heart was safe, whether that can be in your childhood or your adulthood, it doesn't matter where. So just take a minute, and if you want to, you can put it in the chat. And once we have that, I'll give you guys a minute and then we'll take it from there. Yep, your home when you were growing up. Okay. From your family. Beautiful. Okay. Now that you have that in your mind, with some people are saying with their family, where they grew up, that's where they felt safe. I want you just, if you want to, you can close your eyes, but just take yourself back to that spot where you felt the safest, where you felt calm. Take yourself back to that spot and just think about what did the environment look like at that moment where you felt safe? Who was there? What did it sound like? Who were the people that contributed to you feeling safe? What are some of the things that they said or did to make you feel safe? So, this reflection just to kind of help you realize that sometimes we, feel safe when we're around people that are supportive, and we thrive when we're around people that make us feel safe. And some of the kids that are in foster care, that was taken away from them. So they're with you under your care, and you want to replicate how you felt safe for them. And just imagining the environment that you were in when you felt safe, you're going to try to help them feel safe as well. Okay. Now we will jump into the PowerPoint. And the key terms that you're going to hear us talk about in the next hour are these. I just wanted to kind of front load you and give you a little definitions so that when you hear them, you know what they are. So trauma is an emotional response to distressing or life-threatening events that overwhelm a person's ability to cope. ACEs, I've heard that the Muslim Foster Care Association has provided support and information on ACEs, but pretty much they're stressful or traumatic events in childhood linked to long-term health and learning difficulties. That's a big study that was done that kind of pretty much tells us that trauma leads to long-term health effects. And then trauma-informed care, you're going to hear that word a lot. An approach that recognizes the impact of trauma, emphasizes safety and trust, and avoids re-traumatization. And then resilience is a very important word when it comes to trauma. Resilience is the ability to recover from adversity through coping skills, relationship, and support system. Everybody has the ability to be resilient. Surviving things, that makes you resilient. So, self-regulation, the ability to manage emotions, behavior, and attention, especially during stressful situations. And then a safe space, like the one that we thought about and reflected on, where we felt safe when we were children or growing up. An environment where individuals feel physically, emotionally, and culturally secure to learn and share. So, there are different types of trauma. There's traumas, and we like to call these trauma type 1 right here. The types of traumas include like the child maltreatment or neglect or violence in the home, substance misuse in family, loneliness, isolation, serious illness, car accidents, natural disasters, terrorism, and war. And these type 1 traumas tend to be a one-time thing, and then that's it. They end. Type 2 are more like the collective, intergenerational, and the oppression and identity type. Their type 2 and 3 are, it's the same. Type 2 can be a trauma, the same trauma that is happening, but it happens over and over, like violence in the home or substance abuse and so on. And then type 3 is kind of a complex trauma. It's ongoing and different kinds of traumas. And that can look like the collective and intergenerational trauma, which is experienced by groups defined by culture, race, religion, territory, language, socioeconomic status, or passed down across generations through, refugees or wars. All those kind of fall under the umbrella of collective and intergenerational trauma. And then oppression and identity with what's going on in the world. Trauma often layers across identities where, that includes race, religion, class, and more. And oppression can intensify and increase trauma frequency. So trauma is not just about a one event. It can be ongoing, layered, and passed across generations. Impacts of trauma. So according to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, trauma results from an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances experienced or witnessed by an individual that amount to an overwhelming or life-changing effect on the children's or individual's well-being. And in this case, we're talking about children. So we know that trauma can affect people in different ways. And the same group of people experiencing the same trauma, the same event, their trauma response might be different. So that's very important to recognize. They can affect people in health complications. It can affect in the way people, have trust for others in systems and institutions, and it alters their view of the world, and the beliefs and their spirituality. So it's a great impact. So why are we talking about this right now? It's, the first week of school, and we know school is hard for kids, but it's especially hard for youth with trauma. Especially youth who have been in the foster care system or who've experienced trauma, one or more, traumatic events in their lives. So it can be a little hard. School routines, there's mean new expectations, unknown teachers, and then there's the peer dynamics. So these are already hard for regular children that don't haven't experienced trauma or are not in the foster care system, let alone those who have experienced so much. They will induce, more stress for them. Trauma affects readiness to learn, heightened emotional responses, concentration, and sensory sensitivities can all be triggered during transition. So, one thing that I want you to keep in mind is that to anticipate challenges during transitions. If it's a new school or a new environment they're in, it is going to be difficult. So, we already established that starting a new school year is difficult for youth. And for foster youth, it's a little bit more difficult because of all the trauma they've been through. Now we're putting the layer of being Muslim. That can also bring some unique challenges. And some of those challenges include religious needs not being met. If they're in a new school and there's not many Muslim students or staff that are familiar with Islam, it can look like, there's no space or time for prayer or no halal food options or a little support during Ramadan, compared to schools who have a majority of Muslim students in their district. Other struggles can include identity struggles, where kids, they feel the pressure to fit in by hiding their faith or risk of teasing and bullying or Islamophobia, standing out because of the hijab that they're wearing or the traditional clothing. Cultural differences can also be another challenge. Staff may not understand the modesty or the gender rules or family roles, and classroom topics may unintentionally exclude or stereotype Muslim students. Emotional challenges is another unique challenge, and trauma makes it harder to focus, remember, or control emotions. Adding identity stress can make school feel overwhelming as well. Few role models. We tend to see fewer role models in schools that don't have many Muslim, staff, and the curriculum may not reflect Muslim history or voices. And then gaps in advocacy. Foster parents may not know how to ask for religious supports and may not know, is this something I can do? Is it something I can't do? So it's always, there are going to be those gaps. And then schools may assume faith isn't important if caregiver doesn't mention it. So Muslim foster youth need schools that respect their faith and their identity to feel safe, supported, and ready to learn. So what is the effect on trauma, the effect of trauma on learning? It's a big effect. Trauma really does take a toll on learning. We know that the impact of trauma, it impacts the brain structures, and there's brain structure changes from trauma. And how does that impact learning? It's pretty much by memory loss and emotional reactivity and fear response. And then we also know that trauma reduces executive functioning, and that impacts learning by making it hard to focus and making impulsive decisions and not being able to have that balanced impulse control in planning. We know that executive functioning, it takes a lot planning is part of the executive functioning to set goals, to go follow your plan. And that may be difficult for kids that have experienced trauma. And then the impact of trauma also really impacts how staff and how people around the person that was impacted by trauma through like behavioral misinterpretations. So schools or staff might mislabel those symptoms as defiance. If a child is struggling to do what's expected of them, or if the child is struggling to regulate and emotional regulation in place, they might look at them as they're being defiant or they're being difficult or they're refusing. We hear those words, they're refusing, whereas it's a trauma response rather than refusal. And then memory and attention issues, trouble retaining and processing information. And we know schools, it can be intense because you're going from class to class. There's so much information that is being given. There's so much structure, and our traditional school systems don't have the the space and the for traditional classrooms to have breaks or to they it's a fast-paced environment. You're out from one class to another, from one subject to another. And then we know that trauma-informed support builds resilience and fosters safe learning spaces. When schools are providing trauma-informed support for students who have experienced trauma, that's only going to help them thrive and reach their potential. So that's a very important thing to bring up to schools. So caregivers, what can you do at home? How can you support your foster care youth to thrive in school? You know, knowing that they've been through so much trauma. So one thing a few things that you can do is create a safe environment at home, meet the basic needs, provide that security, be present and reassuring. Sometimes you might not have the answers or you might not know what to say. Just being physically present there and just listening. And it's okay for us to tell kids and those who are expressing their feelings, I don't know what to say. That sounds very hard. And it's okay to admit that we don't know. We don't have to know the answers. Also model calm responses. You know, Sometimes when a child is experiencing, um, a lot of emotions and intense emotions, having someone co-regulate themselves next to them helps them, whether it's just sitting next to them and, rubbing their back or touching them or giving them a hug or just sitting in quiet, being silent. That's okay. That's calm responses. It us, teaches the youth around us to calm ourselves and calm our nervous system. Provide structure and routines. Keep meals, sleep, and activities predictable. Explain changes in advance. And then also you can support emotional expression. Like I said, listen without pressure. Validate feelings. Like it's very, what you're feeling is valid. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel, fear and anger. Offer comfort and reassurance. Another thing you can do is encourage healthy coping skills. Like we said, re-engage in, play, school, daily life. Support friendships. Use art, writing, and play for expression. And then, most important is that care for yourself as a caregiver, because we all know that we can't pour from an empty cup. So please feel free to seek help from professionals or community. Practice self-care to stay strong and supportive. We have to care for ourselves, and that again models it to the kids who have experienced trauma. And again, all these strategies, they provide a safe, structured, and compassionate environment, which fosters resilience and healing. So what can you do with the school? Now you can establish a safe and supportive environment at your home, but then at school it may look different. So there are a few things that you can do as a foster care caregiver is that you can, share needs, tell the teachers about your child's needs without all the detail. Let them know about prayer, halal food, or modesty needs. Work together, meet with teachers and counselors regularly. Create plans that support the child instead of punishing them if they're experiencing any difficulties in school. Support belonging. Encourage your child to join activities, clubs, or sports. Find a trusted adult at school that the child can turn to when they're feeling overwhelmed or upset. And then keep things consistent. Routines at home and school, if they're the same, that helps. And then use the same language of respect and patience. And then also be involved, go to school events, meetings, and parent-teacher conferences. Show the child you and the school are on the same team. You're both working towards creating a safe and supportive environment for them. And then also promote trauma-informed practices. Remind staff that behaviors may come from trauma, not bad choices. Suggest calm strategies like quiet spaces or breaks. Use your voice for those children. And like I said, caregivers and schools working together, that only creates a stronger support for the child to thrive. Building a circle of support. What does that look like? And a lot of people think, oh, I need to have people, help me and, you know, and understand, but sometimes it's not easy. It's easier said than done. And pretty much a strong support network is multi-layered. It's combining trauma-informed systems with culturally affirming resources such as your mosques, your imams, Muslim therapists. It ensures Muslim foster youth feel safe, understood, and connected. These are a few websites that you can go on and to learn a little bit about more about trauma and resilience and executive functioning and how to help your child that is in your care. And you're not alone. Trauma-informed care means building a toolbox of resources that combines professional help, school partnerships, and culturally affirming support. You attending this webinar is you, building your toolbox of resources, learning more techniques and strategies. And I got this resource page from the Muslim Foster Care Association, who's generous enough to provide these resources and do the research to give you a toolbox where to reach out to, where to turn to when you're, facing challenges and how to best support the children and the youth in your care. And basically, our key takeaways for our parent caregivers is that creating an environment that promotes healing and resiliency, there's three important components. Consistency at home and at school gives that child that secure, um, safe space that they can predict. They know what comes next. It calms a person down. It can help thrive and heal. And then culturally affirming space, an environment that understands you and is willing to work with you um, and you know help you thrive and be okay being you, is what's important. It will only help healing and resiliency. And then also emotionally safe, an environment that is emotionally safe where a youth can have someone to talk to, someone to reflect with, someone to bounce ideas with, someone to express their feelings to is very affirming and very supportive. And again, that promotes healing and resiliency. So before we, end, I want you just to think, um, this year, what's one way you can help the youth in your care feel more at home this year, at the school year? What is one thing that you can do? And you can put it in the chat or, feel free just to um, think of it in your own on your own. Okay. I love that. Volunteer in the classroom. That's beautiful. That shows your involvement, your, being there, being present, create safe environment for youth to explore feelings. I love that. That's very important for us to create that safe environment where the kids and youth can feel They can express their feelings without being judged, without being reprimanded, without anybody, the adults reacting. Because at the end of the day, everybody has a right to feel what they feel, so we have to express that and teach them how to express it in a healthy way. Open communication, beautiful open communication, because you need to teach them how to advocate for themselves, how to explain and help being heard. We know that a lot of kids who have experienced trauma don't feel heard. Being heard makes them feel safe, makes them feel seen. Can you continue to be a listener and continue to hear them? Beautiful. Be there as a safe person in space. Absolutely. Okay. Here are some resources again that we used in the PowerPoint and for you to explore as well. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Faiza, for that wonderful presentation. It was really, really informative and just yeah, really great.
Sorry, sometimes I talk so fast, so.
Yeah, it's okay. So I guess we do have some time for questions. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. If you have any specific issues that you want more information on, or Faiza could maybe lend her expertise on, please go ahead. So I'll give a few minutes for that if anyone has questions, and if not, we'll go ahead with the post poll.